Hi everyone, thanks for watching this video. It's my pleasure to be able to present my research on professional drummers' energy expenditures and heart rates during live performances. My name is Nadia Azar. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Kinesiology at the University of Windsor in Windsor, Ontario. I'm also the founder and the director of the Drummer Mechanics and Ergonomics Research Lab. Now, kinesiology is the study of human movement. It's a very broad field with many different subdisciplines, and my area of interest is in the mechanics of human movement, especially how it relates to injuries and injury prevention. So, how did a professor of kinesiology end up studying drummers? It all started about 4 years ago when I was at a Dream Theater concert. We had amazing seats, and so I was watching Mike Mangini pretty closely, and I thought to myself how fun it would be if I could get him to my lab, hook him up to all my research equipment, and study his muscle activation and movement patterns. I know, pretty nerdy, but here we are. As luck would have it, a few days after the show, Mike tweeted this: "The technique I've worked so hard for keeps me free of pain. Being sore is from drumming being such a boxing match type of workout." I thought to myself, hey, carpe diem, so I tweeted him back that I was a researcher at the University of Windsor and I would love to do a study comparing his technique to other drummers and to message me if he was interested. Well, he responded, and after several direct messages and a Skype conversation, I had lots of ideas for research studies that would be interesting and fun. Given that a big part of my education and training is in ergonomics and injury prevention, I decided to start there. I'll talk about some of that work in the next video, though, because not long after our initial conversation, Mike took to Twitter again, this time musing about how many calories he burns during a show, and he gave an estimate based on some studies of energy expenditure during drumming. One of the studies he was referring to was this one, the Clem-Burke Drumming Project. About 10 years ago, a group of researchers in the UK got together with Clem Burke, the drummer for the band Blondie, to revisit the concept of energy expenditure in drummers. Early studies reported drummers' energy expenditures to be around 4 metabolic equivalents, which is 4 times the energy cost of sitting quietly. This would be considered moderate intensity physical activity. The problem is, the participants for those early studies were orchestral percussionists from the 1920s. This is a very different style of drumming from modern rock and pop drumming. So this group from the UK monitored Clem's heart rate during live performances and related that to data they obtained in the lab during a ramped cycle ergometer test to exhaustion. And this allowed them to estimate his energy expenditure from the shows based on the heart rate that they collected. So based on these data, they estimated that his energy expenditure was about 600 calories per hour. They also showed that Clem's minute-by-minute heart rate profile was comparable to that of professional soccer players. So when I saw Mike's tweet, I immediately messaged him to say that we could do something similar with equipment that I had in my lab. He thought it was a great idea, so we made arrangements for him to wear the devices during 2 of his shows on Dream Theater's upcoming North American tour, and here's what we found. Dream Theater played the exact same set list at both shows. The first set was a mix of songs, the second set was the Images and Words album from start to finish, and the encore was the 23-minute song A Change of Seasons. The total playing time at each show was about 2.5 hours. On average, Mike used about 614 calories to get through Images and Words, and 193 calories for A Change of Seasons. These numbers include the downtime between songs, as well as songs where there was no percussion. Mike's total energy expenditure, when averaged across both shows and including both the sets and the encore, was a whopping 1,338 calories, and his average intensity for each show was a little over 8 calories a minute. And check out the consistency between the 2 shows. Less than 3% difference in total calories consumed during Images and Words, 3% difference for the whole show, and no difference for A Change of Seasons. Now, right around the time that Mike's shows were taking place, Jeff Burrows heard about what we were doing, and he wanted to get involved as well. The Tea Party had a residency coming up in Toronto a few weeks after Mike's shows, so Jeff and I made plans for him to wear the armbands during 2 of those shows, and here's what we found. Each of the shows included 2 sets and an encore, and the band featured a different album for one of the sets at each of the shows. At the first show, Jeff used about 691 calories to play through the Transmission album, about 627 calories for the second set, which was a mix of their songs, and about 178 calories for the encore. On the second night, he used about 727 calories to play through the Edges of Twilight album, about 477 calories in their second set, and about 55 calories for the encore, which was a single song, Temptation. Jeff's total energy expenditure averaged across the two shows was about 1,378 calories, and his average intensity for each show was a little over 8 calories per minute. Again, this included the calories burned over both sets and the encore, including time between songs, but it did not include the time between the first two sets or between the second set and the encore. So it's been just over 3 years since I collected the data on Mike and Jeff, and so far, 40 professional drummers have participated in this study, including Jeff and Mike themselves. I had at least 10 more signed up to participate in 2020, but we all know how that turned out. I'm planning to get back on track with the study as soon as it's safe to do so. The average age of the participants in my study was 42 years. Rock and metal were the most common musical genres, but pop, country, and musical theater were also represented. The performances were held in a variety of different settings, including clubs, theaters, arenas, and outdoor venues, both in the winter and during the summer. The average performance duration was 76 minutes. A few months into the study, I decided to add heart rate monitoring to the data collection protocol. So I have energy expenditure data for 39 participants and heart rate data for 29 participants. The average rate of energy expenditure across 39 participants was 10 calories per minute. To put this into context, for a person whose body mass is 68 kilograms or 150 pounds, this rate of energy expenditure is comparable to what that person would expend during a moderate intensity session on a stationary rower or bicycle, or while running at 5 miles per hour, which is a 12-minute mile pace. The average heart rate across the 29 participants who were monitored was 144 beats per minute, and the average peak heart rate was 175 beats per minute. Typical resting heart rate for a healthy adult is 60 to 100 beats per minute, so these values are well above resting heart rate. But if you want to get a sense of how hard someone is working based on their heart rate, you have to compare their heart rate during the task to their maximum heart rate, which is the fastest possible rate at which the heart is physically capable of beating. Measuring this directly requires those tests to exhaustion that I mentioned earlier, and those tests have to be done in a lab, so that's not really possible with this participant group. So instead, I used either the drummer's age predicted maximum heart rate, which can be calculated using this equation on the screen, or the maximum heart rate that was observed during the data collection session, whichever was highest. Once I had that number, I calculated the participants' heart rates from the shows as a percentage of that maximum heart rate, and then added up how much time they spent in each of 5 exercise intensity categories defined by the American College of Sports Medicine. On average, participants spent 26% of their performance at moderate intensity, which is between 64 and 75% of the maximum heart rate. They spent 54% of the performance at vigorous intensity, which is 77 to 95% of max heart rate, and 3% of the performance at near or maximal intensity, which is 96 to 100% of maximum heart rate. The American College of Sports Medicine and the Canadian Society for Exercise Physiology both recommend that healthy adults get at least 150 minutes of moderate to vigorous intensity exercise per week. So if the average show duration was 76 minutes and the participants spent 80% of their playing time at the moderate to vigorous intensity level, then they could easily meet or exceed that recommendation while they are out on tour. So it's clear that drumming can be a high-intensity activity, and this graph puts it into perspective nicely. In this graph, each of the red bars represents a participant's average heart rate expressed as a percentage of their maximum heart rate. The group's average heart rate in absolute terms was 144 beats per minute, which works out to 79% of their maximum heart rates. Compare that to the average heart rate for a group of professional soccer players during competitive match play, which was 86% maximum heart rate. So the bottom line here is that playing the drums is clearly a high-intensity activity, and this is important for a few reasons. First, the results of this study suggest that playing the drums is a viable alternative to engaging in traditional forms of exercise, like organized sports or going to the gym, in order to achieve the weekly exercise recommendations for healthy adults. Also, the results clearly showed that professional drummers are likely to exceed these targets while they are out on tour. Because of this, professional drummers should consider engaging in strength and conditioning programs for the same reasons that athletes do, to prepare their bodies to handle the physical demands of their profession in order to deliver their peak performance and reduce the risk of injuries. I'd like to acknowledge the individuals and organizations who contributed to the success of this study, either by promoting the study and the results, or helping me to recruit participants, the participants themselves, and their bands and crews for hosting me and my team on site during their shows. Thanks for watching, and I look forward to answering your questions during the live event on Facebook, which will be at 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time on Friday, February 12th. If you're seeing this after the live event is over, you can also reach out to me by email or through social media.